I sent you the individual brain areas, and it's quite interesting. I had a chance to get through. A lot of the control group stayed pretty much the same in some of those, but there was interesting areas where some development was happening in the control group, but a lot more was happening in the group that did the program. So I think that's quite
So
encouraging.
how many, remind me what the numbers were in each group?
Well, it was a pilot program, so because we don't know anything, it's like let's know
Hmm.
something so we can learn more, is the conversation I had with your friend Michael. And so the numbers were 15 in the group that took it,
Yeah.
and 10 in the control group.
Hmm.
So
And
it's a
from what I saw, it looked as if you got about a third more progress on
yeah,
gross and fine motor skills and speech and language in
yeah,
the experimental group compared to the control group.
yeah,
So, as probably the statistician said, the numbers probably aren't enough to reach
yeah,
statistical significance, but they show an interesting trend, a positive trend,
yeah,
which
yeah.
bigger numbers would start to iron out one way or the other.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And I think one of the things I do want to talk about is what is the because so the biggest areas of improvement were the gross motor skills, the fine motor skills, and then some interesting things in speech and language, which
Mm,
which we might iron out when we have a bigger group.
mm.
Okay, people are starting to come in now, so everyone always is sort of fashionably late.
It depends where you are as well. There's
I
big
think
differences
so. I
across the
think,
world in this.
and there were some in India that have this, hello. Hi, Virginia.
How are you?
Hi.
Great. So we're just getting started. Virginia's got a wonderful school. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your school?
Sure. So hello everyone. My name is Virginia Rivera, and right now I'm in Puerto Rico. I live Puerto Rico, Chicago, and India. And in India, I have a school for students from the age 2 to 19. Many of the students have never been to school before, but they're so smart and they learn so fast that they catch up really easily with their age group. And we have around 600 students at this moment. The school is 2 years old, and we're right now on vacation. And I think our schools start again in June. So we are on vacation right now. It's called James International School. It has a global curriculum, so we're always evaluating curriculums and new things to bring to the students. They're sort of our guinea pigs to see how they react and
Mm.
how they learn, and then we share with whoever is sharing with us their curriculum. Then we let them know what is going on if the students are receptive. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
wonderful.
Good. I'm getting texts saying I'll be 5 minutes late, I'll be 5 minutes late, but I'm going to start and anyway, we'll make a start and I will be letting people in as they come along. So let me bring up hang on a second. I need to share my screen first before I do that. Okay, so I'm going to bring this up and hopefully you can all see my screen. And maybe also me. Okay, so yes, so this Planet Harmony program, we were funded by UK Research and Innovation to turn research into innovation, and my interest has been because I have worked across what you could call traditional music therapies, let's say clinical music therapies, but also a host of other music and arts-based methods, and really trying to pinpoint what are the key ingredients that we need for certain outcomes. So it's about turning musical outcomes into real world outcomes. And of course, having worked in mental health, anyone that's gone near mental health research knows, early years are like where if you want to be preventative, if you want to set foundations for life, if you want to avoid health problems, mental health problems, early years is really the place to go. And so looking at Bernardo's is, okay, going to be entering soon as well. Okay, so looking at, speaking of the work of Bernardo's, who'll be joining us shortly, there are a lot of challenges today. We're having more challenges today with not just attention, but general looking after ourselves. Let me just, how do I go to the next slide? Okay. So this is about building a collaborative community because of what's happening in early years challenges, in the kinds of things that we're seeing with general being able to take care of themselves, to being ready for school, being able to learn, being able to respond, being able to sit still. And things like when you start to study child brain development and musical movement, often children that can't sit still need more movement. And so we're looking at how can these early years, these really foundational years of 3 to 7 years old, how can they become learning ready, but how can we make the most impact possible? I'm really happy to say that I'm forming a relationship with UNICEF and the UNICEF Advocacy Board in the UK. And they are having some, very interesting statistics about, children, how many children are not reaching the expected developmental milestones. The children that are on free meals are reaching even less milestones. This doesn't even take into account for disparities between not just boys and girls, but ethnic groups, geography, socioeconomics. So it's known that there is an issue going on. And what my goal is, like, how do we impact this as much as possible? Because I was in conversation with Harvard Center for Developing Child. They were evaluating, nurseries and across the U.S. in particular, nurseries and interventions, and they said, like, we're missing the mark. They're not doing as much as they could. So it's like, how? And so I teamed up with Michael Lazaroff, who's been researching this for, I think, over 30 years. It's like, how do we really, create a method that really works developmentally, specifically for the individual grade age groups. A lot of times they're kind of, where we bunch them together in a nursery, but actually there's different things going on at the different ages. So our program is working with there's a different program for age 3 than there is for age 4, than there is, for age 5. So this is really important to really target developmental needs and what's happening to that child at that age. So I want to just open this up because we know what gone over just some rough statistics about, what the challenges are. But maybe, Virginia, while you're here, like, what do you notice as some of the challenges or the needs in that sort of age group of the 3 to 7, or what do you notice, if anything, in terms of what's going on? Oh, you're muted. Please unmute yourself.
Would you remember that the students that we have are in India, and they are already competing with, I can't say malnourishment because I think our students are very well nourished. We do have a lot of families, contrary to in other places, have a buffalo or a cow, and so they do eat, and they also have a little plot of land, even if it's tiny. So a lot of their food security is not it's not a situation, at least where we're at. So our kids do come well fed, and they bring their own lunch. If not, then we provide lunches for them. The food where we're at is vegetarian, so these are very healthy kids, and they're very attentive. They all want to participate. So I think that there is definitely a link between eating well and
Yeah.
really ready to understand and to participate, because I am in Puerto Rico, and when I first wanted to have a school, I visited many schools on the island, and we're part of the United States. We're very malnourished. Our kids do not eat correctly. And I have to say that we had so many issues of ADHD and so many other issues
Yeah.
that were prevalent in what I think our country is very developed. It's just like the US. Nonetheless, when I compare students from the US, Puerto Rico, or India, our kids in India they were very thirsty for knowledge. They wanted to participate. They had the
Good.
energy and they were able to listen and follow
Mm,
instructions.
Mhm.
So now that you're saying this, I didn't even put two and two together. Now
yeah.
that I'm listening to you the first 5 minutes, I
Mm.
think a lot of things are starting to make sense.
Yeah, no, that's good. No, that's really positive to hear, and that's very interesting to hear. I mean, these statistics are coming, well, not the UNICEF ones, but the Kindred Squares coming from, children in the UK. So that's really interesting you're pointing that out. I think maybe Sally, do you want to share, for example, any sort of challenges that you've noticed that come to mind that you've also dealt with through this type of
Well, I
framework?
would probably mirror what the Kindred 2 report has said. So, I mean, if I
Yeah,
just go through some of the things you briefly showed, it was sitting still,
yeah,
playing, sharing with other children,
yeah,
listening and reflecting back, not getting overly upset when away from parents, holding a
yeah,
writing implement correctly, dressing independently, basic numeracy skills such as counting to 10, communicating their needs, using a book correctly, independent eating and drinking, toilet trained, and use of basic language. Now,
yeah.
when that report was published in 2024, teachers felt that there'd been a decline in the previous year.
Hmm.
But if I go back to 2004, 2005, with a slightly older group of children, 4 to 5 year olds and no, 5 to 6 year olds and 8 to 9 year olds, we had a sample of over 600 children across 8 mainstream schools in Northern Ireland.
Hmm.
And they found that 48% of the 4 to 5 year olds did not have the full range of neuromotor skills we would expect for children of their age.
Hmm.
And 35% of 8 to 9 year olds showed a similar profile. And when they compared those results on physical measures with educational baseline measures, they found that there was a relationship or correlation between less mature physical skills
Hmm.
and lower educational performance,
Mm.
not taking intelligence into account. So this was just a sort of general spread that seemed to link the two together. And although we know that some specific learning difficulties are intrinsic, what we seem to be seeing
Mm.
is a trend where children in countries driven by increasingly by economics and technology
Yeah,
are not necessarily getting the amount of stimulation in physical skills, social
yeah.
engagement, and communication skills in the preschool years. It's not that parents don't want to do it, it's just nobody seems to have the time to do it. And there are so many other distractions.
Mm.
And if I go back again about 20 years, I remember reading an article that said if you are interrupted in the middle of a focused task, it can take 15 minutes to get back to the same state of focused attention we were in before the interruption. So we are living, and our children are living increasingly in a world where there is constant distraction. And therefore, we are seeing an apparent explosion of attention deficit disorder and related problems,
Yeah.
not all of which seem to follow the same pathway which I saw 30 years ago, where there was an underlying basic neurological reason. I think this is partly environmentally driven as well. So that would be the sort of problems I see at the moment.
Well, interesting, you're mentioning this because it kind of lines up very nicely with the data, which I'm going to show in just a second, that um, the children who didn't do the program, one of the areas that they increased, you know, was visual. So they're getting visual stimulation. But where the children in this program increased the most was in fine and gross motor, and there was next to nothing. So it's really what
Mm.
you're describing. So the results really mirror that. Um, so I think the opportunity, that I'm looking at, is really how we harness the science of brain development, right? So I've been to a couple of different play groups and nurseries and, doing sing-alongs or, different things like that. But really looking at how we create and how we deliver programs that are age specific, that are training, simulating, and reinforcing the things that should be happening in that child's development so that they do. The digital part, I made this digital so that it's accessible, but it's definitely not looking at a screen. The screen tells you the activity that you do, but you'll probably be holding hands and doing row, row, row a boat together. They're doing lots of movement exercises. And one of the nicest feedbacks from the parents has been that it's actually a really good bonding time. And interestingly, it's the child that advocates for the program because that's when they get the undivided attention. Um, so this is also, pretty easy to do in schools because you only need one teacher to do the demonstration with them. And I had families where the sibling would do it with them, as well. So I think it's more than possible to have a teacher and have the children also do it, with each other. So talking about how can we be effective to get real world outcomes in music therapy, the neurologic music therapy that I was trained in, they work with a transformational design model, which says how does the musical outcome translate into a real world outcome. And so what we're looking here is like, how do the activities in this program simulate and train development and actually translate not just to a musical outcome, but to a real world outcome. And the program is based in music and movement. So it is fairy tales, and it is fairy tales with characters, but it is very much based in the musical activities and the movement activities. Sally, did you want to say a little bit in terms of why music and movement is important?
Yes, I don't know quite where to begin. I think I probably need to start from my area of speciality,
Sure.
which is working with children from usually above 7 years of age, when they are first starting to show up with signs of underachievement.
Mhm.
And what we do is carry out a physical assessment, or teachers carry out a physical assessment, and then they put the children through a developmental movement program that takes the children back in time motorically in terms of movements to replicate movements that should have been made in the first year of life, to give the brain a so-called second chance to form the neural connections, which for some reason, some of them just haven't been made as efficiently as they should. And what we find is that as they go through that program, although you're not teaching specific skills, things like posture, balance, coordination, eye movements which support visual perception also all start to improve. So developmental movements, taking a child back to where they are in their abilities and building from there,
Mm.
make a difference to more than just the exercises that you are giving them. And similarly, music affects all levels of the brain, from the brain stem, which is our basic survival function, up through the limbic system, which involves emotions and memories and laying down of emotional memories, up to the cerebral cortex, which is the seat of cognition and of executive functioning. So music is essentially physical. It affects all levels of the brain, and it helps to match sounds to visualization, to imagination, to coordination, depending on the activities that you are doing. So it's building all sorts of skills.
Yeah.
And I always describe music and movement as being a child's first language. Long before a child learns to utter words, we as adults learn to read what they need and what they're trying to say from a combination of posture, gesture, change of tone of voice, quality of cry, and so on. And those things are essentially motoric and musical.
Yeah.
So we say that music and movement precede verbal language.
Yeah.
And if you want to prepare a child for verbal language, music and movement can be harnessed to help that process.
Yeah. Absolutely. And with Planet Harmony, and I'm going to show you the program in a minute, this is based on the Sonatel method, which has had over, I think he said up to almost 40 years of research on it. So this method was designed to address the multiple areas. Oh, everyone's going to come in now. Okay, hang on a minute. That's why I'm going back because I'm letting people in. Okay. So I hope Elizabeth got in as well. Yeah. Okay, yes, okay. All right. So the Planet Harmony is based on the Sonatel method. So child brain development is very multidimensional. But we're looking at a variety of kinds of ways of involving music and movement that target those things. So each animal, and I'm going to show you the program in just a second. The story is a fairy tale and that has a number of different animal characters. They have a different animal each week. And the animal teaches them a different music and movement exercise, as well as character qualities, right? And character traits. So they're involved and immersed in a story. And then through that, they'll have 3 days with each animal in their story. On the first day, they listen to the piece of music. They don't sing because they're sort of just familiarizing themselves also with that piece of music. They listen to, let's say, the horse song, and then while imagining themselves as a horse. And you'll start to notice them do all kinds of funny things, even when they're just listening and imagining. And then they listen to the song again, and they draw the horse. And this is actually very important because this is about what is that child able to perceive. And there is, in fact, is it a developmental test, the drawing a man test,
Yes.
that is based on, children who have problems. Maybe you'll say more about this, Sally, but have problems with movement, draw very small hands and sort of distorted limbs. It's the fact that they aren't able to perceive it and they don't therefore have it as strongly. So the combination of listening and drawing is very important. And then being immersed in a story, learning about the character qualities. So that's the first day. The second day consists of doing more musical things with that animal. So singing the song, humming the song, tapping the rhythm of the song, and then most importantly, moving like that animal. So the movements of the animals are really important because those are simulating things that should be happening in that child's development, right? So you'll have fly like a bat, squat and waddle like a goose, slither on your stomach like a snake, run like an ostrich, coordinate like a monkey. So but those movements are different at each of the year levels, and the characters are different, the songs are different. So this is the overall method, but the actual movement and musical activities are specific to each age. So the age 3 program is different from age 4, different from age 5, different from age 6. And then on the third day, they do combinations. So performing, one animal after the other, or crawl on all fours while speaking the words of the songs. They sort of have activities that ask them to put this together, as well as create. So on the third day, they'll create something. They'll create a musical instrument, a homemade musical instrument, and then play that along to the music, or create an animal costume. And this is really important for getting tactile and for getting them to put different ideas together for themselves. What did they see about the horse? They put the tail on or they put the hooves on. They've made connections and they can create something for themselves. Sally, did you want to say anything else about simulating the movement or anything else in regards to this?
I think I just made a couple of notes on each of the days because I think it probably mirrors what you say, which is day one involves primarily listening and then visualizing from the sounds
Yeah.
what this is all about. expressing through drawing the ideas and emotions. Day two is translating that activity described in the songs into actions, and that's the really important part.
Yeah.
And vocalizing through humming, because when you hum as opposed to open mouth singing, you get more bone conduction and you get increased feedback from the ear to the jaw and the jaw back to the ear. So it helps to refine auditory discrimination. And I think it's in Russia actually, where when a promising young male singer's voice breaks, they are only allowed to hum for the first few years after the voice is broken, because it helps to increase the range from deep sort of basso profundo up to bel canto almost, if
Yeah.
they hum for longer before they
Yeah.
start to sing. So humming is really important. And many of the characters, like the INPP movement programs, follow a developmental and evolutionary sequence, ensuring that the children do go back and practice some of those movements that they may have just skipped a little bit when they were younger because they were too interested in walking and therefore didn't spend very long in crawling and so on. And in day three, they just sort of put it all together. So it's a lovely combination of listening, imagining, moving, getting feedback, and putting a fine motor activity with it all together.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying, in INPP, the evolutionary types of movement, I think that's very much what the Sonatel method and Michael's work works with. So that's definitely something to highlight, that it is simulating movement that's evolutionary, that's simulating things that should be happening in that child at that age, that maybe they aren't slithering on their stomach, but it's really important for them to do that and for them to be able to hold their head up and look around. There's also, this is just, it's making sure all the things that should happen in that child's development do happen.
I think
And
he has a lovely description of this where he talks about every infant being born as primitive man. And he said, in that first year of life, in telescopic form, that infant must replicate his own evolutionary history in the
yeah,
developmental movements that he learns to make. That we cannot assume that an infant is born encultured into the modern world. These physical skills have to be built in, and that we are still part of the species of mammals. And all mammals share the need for physical interaction and engagement in those early years.
yeah. And you'll notice in the different year levels, in the age 6 one, they're kind of more learning dances and row your boat. And in the earlier ones, it is more of the primal movements, on your stomach and squatting and, all these types of things. So that is a fascinating part of this research and something that's come through very strongly in the results. We did this. There was a group of children who took the program, and it's a 10-week program. And then we measured it against a group of children who didn't take the program. And the results were measured with a neuromotor screening, which Sally and her institute put together, which looks at, I'm just going to briefly actually show you the screening. So it's different for per year level. So the age, I'm just bringing up the age 4 one, but there's a one for 3, 4, 5, and 6. But it covers the gross motor skills, joint and muscle sense, fine motor skills, speech and language, vision, hearing and speech, behavior and play, and general things about looking after themselves, general areas. So it covers, all the sort of key markers. And what we found is the children who didn't do the program made, things changed overall, but there was quite a significant change in the children who did do the program. This is a 10-week version of the program. It can be made to be 20 weeks, but for the pilot test, we ran the 10-week standard version. So it's quite encouraging in terms of the results that we're seeing. And the biggest difference between the children who did take the program and didn't take the program were in the gross motor skills and fine motor skills. The control group didn't have any change in these two areas. They basically kind of stayed the same. They changed in vision, they changed in other areas. But I just like to, we spoke a little bit about this, but I don't think it's known enough. Why should parents care about fine and gross motor skills? And Sally, I know you wrote a book on reflexes, right? So do you want to just bring up why would it be significant for there to be changes in fine and gross motor skills?
Because those physical skills are going to support everything that a child does, not only in a classroom, but all through life. So the first thing is postural control. It's said that the first thing a child has to learn to do in that first sort of 18 months of life is to go through the processes of learning to stand on its own 2 feet with free use of the hands. So the hands are not involved in supporting balance or postural control. And that means that the hands become free for manipulatory activities. And there's also a link between what happens with the mouth and with the hands in terms of speech development. So
Yeah.
if your postural control or balance is underdeveloped, you are already scavenging from some of those, potentially from some of those fine motor skills that are going to support writing and so on. Balance and postural control are necessary to be able to sit still, to stand still, and carry out coordinated activities. And what is less well known is that there is a direct link between control of posture, the relationship between the head and the body, and centers involved in the control of eye movements that are going to support tracking along a line of print when you learn to read, hand-eye coordination in writing, being able to adjust visual distance when copying or catching a ball. So these physical skills support everything later on. And if you are a highly intelligent child, but your physical skills are not very well developed, you can compensate. You can use your intelligence to compensate. And people may not realize for a long time that you have an underlying difficulty, but it will be at the expense of achieving what that child is really capable of, because compensation always demands a price at another level. So they are everything, really.
Yeah, yeah. And this is something that is not really highlighted. I mean, it is, I'll go back to, oops, I'll go back to this first one with, we were looking at learning readiness and all these things of, sitting still, communicating, listening. It actually relates to all of this. And what's the fascinating part that isn't known about what physical improvement has to do, and how really, like, learning that particular character, having music that has those qualities, having the music induce the movement, being able to repeat it and do it, at different speeds and in different ways, and that this is really supportive to developing those, and that those support everything. We think a lot about just, like, kids learning to write, but they're not really they might struggle with that if they don't have some of these things in place. Do you want to just say anything about that?
Well, simply that if you don't have a stable physical base, it's very difficult to be coordinated. If you imagine trying to stand on a wobbly board and write and to write neatly, you wouldn't be able to do it very well. And for children where that postural control, the upper and lower body coordination isn't well developed, they have poor truncal or core stability, they don't have this secure point,
Yeah,
balance point to support these other more complex motor activities.
yeah,
So taking them back and giving them the chance to develop that, which it should ideally occur naturally, but increasingly we are seeing groups of
yeah,
children where this does not seem to be taking place, and I think it's more of a problem in the so-called advanced countries than
yeah,
those where perhaps they, as your other speaker was saying, that they live in a small house, but they have a cow, they go into the fields, they play with their mother, they do
yeah,
tasks, chores with their mother, and they learn some of these physical skills literally at their mother's apron strings,
yeah.
as we used to.
Hmm. It's interesting, the results from this, because you'll see that these are the results from the group who took the program. The control group didn't have any results in this area. I'll go to the next, hang on. This is, okay. Speech and language, there was some difference. I think I didn't show the vision slide. The vision slide was where the control group and this group were pretty much even, because it's all about what's being stimulated. So obviously visually they're being stimulated, but they're not nearly being stimulated enough in the physical realm that affects and supports so much. We are getting some results with slightly better results than the control group in speech and language, but what we want to do is we want to do this on much bigger groups of children, and we're going to be continually testing this in order to develop. So I just want to quickly also show you a little bit of the program, because I know I'd give you a sneak peek at it. So it's delivered digitally, right? And you have your own we have a library of resources. You can book one-to-one sessions for support. But it starts, you'll have an introduction. This is where you take the neuromotor screening right at the very beginning, and where you download the lyric sheet so you can sing along. Let me just go here. And then you'll see that there's 3 days per animal, right? So at the very top, you have little tick boxes whenever you finish each one of the activities, and you'll see which activities you'll do that day. Every day starts with the hello song. You can also besides the printed out lyrics, you can just click on the lyrics here. You'll have the story that you read to the child. Then this is where they listen to the song. They imagine themselves as a jellyfish while listening to the music. So this is sing the words of the song, sing the goodbye. So each day, there's extra games also, like if you want to do some extra activities and a community forum. So each day runs along like that, with the second day, we're clapping and humming. As Sally said, clapping and humming is really, really important for multiple reasons. So you'll spend 3 days with the animal. Each session, I think, takes about 15 minutes. You sing the hello song, do a couple of activities, sing the goodbye song. So that's how it's set up. You'll have 3 days with each animal. This one's kind of fun because it's the jellyfish. You sing the song and you also move like a jellyfish in the bath. So there's there's also activities how you can get sort of more creative. There's a number of different ways. I think there was the horse was in the hay or something like that. So move like a jellyfish, the movement in the air, and or like do it in the bath. So there's a number of each animal. This is the year 3 program, which is the youngest year level. You spend 3 days with each animal, right? And then you're going to take that neuromotor screening at the very beginning. Just there's a video about it, and you take the screening and you take it at the very end as well. So it's very easy to use. You do also have a library of resources on understanding this, and then also some parenting tips and guidance that can also be instructional for educators, anyone that's working with the children. And then if you are struggling at all, or if you're noticing some things in that child, you can book one-to-one sessions, and that will also enable us to tell you, as we mentioned, the pilot was just the 10-week program. This is like 10 weeks, right? 3 days a week for 10 weeks. But there are ways to extend the program. And if you're noticing challenges or even just opportunities of the child responding really, really well, you can book a one-to-one session, and we'll tell you how to extend and enhance the program. So it's all quite easy to use, and it's online, but as you'll see, it's not about staring at the screen, right? It's about doing those movements. It's about tapping. It's about humming. So a lot of times you'll just push play and be doing the activities. So that's a little bit of the program itself. And I think the vision that I'm wanting for this is that music is no longer something that we just listen on Spotify,
Mm.
that it actually becomes something that's living, that's alive, not just through characters in the stories, but like what you experience when you move to it, what you experience even just by being that character, just by becoming a horse and galloping and making the galloping, and by learning different types of singing, learning different types of movement, by tapping and playing, coordinating, different types of rhythm, that music becomes alive again and we understand the value of it. That's why we're capturing all that data. That's why we're saying, what's currently playtime or music time, we can make it so much more powerful, right? That's why I was so excited to pair with Michael, who's developed such a streamlined method that we use at the different age ranges to target everything, the cognitive faculties, the physical ones, the psychological ones, the evolutionary movement. Is that I want the music to really come alive for us, that it is like music and movement become a primary subject, and that child development, that we realize what's going on, what is going on with this like unbelievable opportunity, that it almost, for me personally, it almost feels like a crime to miss it. It's like, do you
Mm.
realize, like, we're really setting foundations for life? Do you realize how much we can change in the trajectory of that child? And we can do it with a lot of fun and with stories and with a lot of, quirky, fun movements. So that's the vision that I'm holding for this. And I have a number of different types of packages to deliver this for schools as well as clinics and charities and families. But before I go into that, I just wanted to open things up to questions. Elizabeth, Lizzie, or Elena, Virginia, if you are, if anyone has any questions they want to ask. Where did Elizabeth go? Or Virginia, do you have any questions?
No, I'm just looking and seeing how we can actually adapt this. So, for our kids, I think it's really useful and definitely the data behind it. Uh, we are teaching our kids in school English as the same and Hindi at the same time. So,
Yeah,
yeah, and I think this would actually be a great way for them to practice. I
yeah.
don't think I can actually have the parents participate as much, but definitely with the teachers while they're in school, they could do that. So I'm just thinking ahead and seeing how we could definitely bring this in.
Yeah, no, definitely. And with the, there's plenty of ways that this can work in schools, and you can just do those guided activities, in the classroom, right? And there may be some that they do in the classroom, and maybe they want to continue some at home as well. Like there's absolutely no problem with repeating them. To be honest, the more they do them, the better.
Okay.
And it is, it is imagined to be at home with the parent, but there's no problem with the teacher introducing it. And as you saw, it's quite easy. It's quite easy for just to, they're all guided activities, so it's pretty self-explanatory. Um,
I think the idea of using it to teach English is a really good one, actually. We piloted it in a school in South Yorkshire a number of years ago, and this was with reception and primary one children, so sort of 4 to 6 year olds. And the thing that I had not anticipated, but which the teachers pointed out, was that the children's use of language improved dramatically because both Michael in his songs, and this was a slightly different program, so they were stories I'd written, we hadn't, for want of a better term, dumbed the language down for children. We'd used the language that I had when I was a small child, which you didn't understand a lot of the words, but you absorbed them osmotically from
Right.
the context in which they were used and the activities in which they were used. And so the teachers talked about children starting to write in their stories that they opened their eyes and a chink of light was coming through the curtains, which was the sort of language they would never have used a few weeks before. So it was almost like a hidden bonus we hadn't anticipated. And I think that could be harnessed to teach another language.
That's how I'm seeing it. I'm actually loving it. I'm actually envisioning how we can incorporate it. And to me, this is definitely a great way to involve language in it, you know. So
Yeah, one thing it was also a feedback from the parents that they're using words from the stories.
Mm.
And with the story part, I might make an audio book, like an audio version of it playable, but that's the one part that has to be read to the child.
That's
And
important. That's really important. Don't make an audiobook.
yeah, I told him because I left it, you saw it on the screen, the words were on
Mm.
the screen, like in audio, it's like, read it to
right.
the child, read it to them, look at them. They can look at the pictures of the animal, but read it to the child. I mean, Sally, do you want to say why you think that's important?
Well, you've got the social, emotional, and physical engagement with the parent or with the teacher, which as soon as you have an audiobook, it's not the same. And
Yeah,
you will get variation every day in the tone of voice and the timing, which is the sort of way that we naturally learn to develop and not be cartoon characters. So the
yeah,
risk is if you audiobook it, it's better than not doing anything, but you're taking away an element that's really important about, in my view, the program, which is the time that's spent in real physical engagement and
yeah,
interaction
yeah,
between parent and child or teacher and child.
yeah. And they found that's when they sit and they imagine, really imagine and immerse themselves in it. Um, Good. Were there any other questions from?
Just a quick one from me. Obviously, I missed the first half. Is there a recording of the
Yeah, sure.
webinar?
Yeah, yeah.
Great.
We'll find out. I know you work in the Warwick sort of district with children. Is there any sort of things that you want to ask about in terms of the program in that kind of setting?
I think I want to check that the first half won't have answered them already. But
Yeah, sure.
yeah, it sounds really, really interesting. My toddler groups, we only really have 5 to 10 minutes of singing at the end. But yeah, I love the idea of using music to help children develop. I've certainly seen it with my children, so it'd be interesting to think how that could work in a children's center setting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's interesting because this was obviously tested with families, and we did get some very good feedback about, that being a nice bonding time. But they're all sort of, were you here to see the bit where I sort of showed a bit of the program? Yeah, it's all sort of guided online activities, and that could just as easily be done by a facilitator in a children's center. So, um, and then the other thing I think that I'll just finish with is that because there are 3 days of the song, and children tend to find one song that they like that becomes more of their favorite. It is designed if you wanted to do sort of like a group show or like a school show or a children's center, event. You could very easily create a really nice, sort of event or theater performance out of this. So, I found with, children take to one song and they really will kind of like learn that one song, by heart, right? So you could have like, a competition, or you could have performances of the different animals. And the nice thing is the stories all kind of flow together. It's the same world of Planet Harmony. So it does work really well to use it in a group performance as well as just like, sort of facilitated sessions. So, that's the fun part. Any other questions before we kind of wrap up? No, good. All right, great. Well, I think you have my email, and I will be sending out a recording. We had actually quite a number of people in the recording. So for those of you who are watching at home, this is how you get in touch with me. There's different packages of ways of doing it. Individual parents can purchase the individual program. With clinics, we can do either, and schools, we can either do like wholesale packages, or we can do partnerships. where we share, part of the profits from it. So there's all kinds of different options and ways of doing it and finding, what really works for you and the setting that you're working with. But I do hope that we can all come together for the betterment of the early years, which is kind of a very underlooked part of society. The Royal Foundation Center for Early Childhood said that there's 45.5 billion in value added to the economy by a greater focus on early years.
Yep.
So I will tell you that this does pay off. And to those watching in the replay, I know we've got a lot of pediatricians and different people. This really, really does pay off. To parents who aren't aware of the kinds of effects and what can be done with music and movement, this pays off not just to your child, but to society at large. So if that's it, any further questions? If not, I think I will wrap it up there. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for being part of this. It's a very sort of thoughtful thing to be a part of. It's not what people immediately think about. Let me just stop sharing for a second so I can actually say goodbye to everybody. It's something that people don't immediately think about, that it can have that much impact and make that much of a difference. So thank you for being the thoughtful people and facilitators and everything that you are to do this kind of work. So yeah. All right. I'll see you soon then. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.